I wanna. It might be a shtickle piece of historical fiction. I have to be matching that. It might be historical fiction. I have an idea. It might be historical fiction. In the Reb Pinchas of Karetz, one of the early Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, had a son, Reb Moshe of Karetz, who opened a printing press. With the tachlis of the printing press was to print Chassidish Svarim. It's a famous printing press. Anybody who's into antiques knows it. Salavita Shas. If you can get a hold of a Salavita Shas, it's worth who knows what. Because no Litvaks wanted to print Chassidish Svarim. Eventually, they expanded into more Svarim. They printed a Chumash, they printed a Navi, they printed a Tehillim. If you go next door, all the Chumashim are Salavita, like the Tfus of Salavita. Yeah. 1 second. So later on, there was a printing press in Shitamar. Later on, what do you say? So the Pinchas of Karetz's last name was Shapiro. Yeah, the Pinchas of Karetz's last name was Shapiro. Now, what do you say? Yeah, that's all this group. So now, the Rav Moshe Karetz, or Rav Moshe Shapiro, who's the founder of the Salavita Press, he had 2 sons. One was Shmuel Abba, one was Pinchas, named after the grandfather. And they were the ones who printed the Salavita Shas. And when they printed it, now it was very common in those days, you can still see it, like the Frankel Rambam has it, you get a Haskama. The tachlis of the Haskama wasn't that you had Rishus to print. The tachlis of the Haskama was that nobody else has Rishus to print. Meaning Haskama was really just an Isser on other people to print. Because you wanted to make sure you made your money back. To print the full set of Shas cost who knows what. And to make sure you made your money back, you would go to Rabbanim and they'd make an Isser on anybody else to print the Shas, or whatever it is that you printed. You'd have a certain amount of time that you could print it for. And then when you sold out, someone else could come into the game. So Salavita went and they got a Haskama from a few different people. They got Haskama from the Baal Tanya. They got Haskama from Ephraim Zalman Margolius, which was very, very important. Like the main Haskama that they were able to fadin was Ephraim Zalman Margolius, who was the Grace of Pesach, the Rav of Brod. He was, considered, respected by everybody, by Chassidim, by Misnagdim, by everybody. They got his Haskama that they could print the Shas exclusively for 25 years. They printed their Shas in 1804. I think is when they printed their Shas. In 1834, I think. Maybe they printed in 1802. Place right at the end of their tkufa, 23 years in or 22 years in to their Haskama period, to their Cherem period, the printing press in Vilna, Haradna, which was run by the Ram family, wanted to decide to print the Shas. The Vilna Shas, that we all know, that everyone knows today. The Vilna Shas. Now they went to Rabbanim, Grace Rabbanim, to get Haskamas that they should have the right to print in violation of the Haskama of the Salavita Shas, and B, to have their own copyright, that no one else could copy their work. They got Haskamas from Grace Rabbanim, but not at this stage. It wasn't any brand name, but they got from the Rav of Karlin, the Mishmas Yaakov, Yaakov Karliner. They got from others. They got from the Rav of Nevardik, Rav David Nevardiker. These were big names, local, big names at the time. These are not people that are today the most famous in the world, but big names locally. And they got Rishos to print their Shas. Now, when Slavita heard, when the Shapiro brothers heard that the Vilna printing press was printing a Shas, so they took them to the entire. They were furious. The time had not expired yet. They said, "You're violating the Haskama that we received from Ephraim Zalman and from others and whatever." Now, so what would they say, Mechan? So the Rabbi Yaakov Karliner is from the first Chuvas that wrote on it. He was saying, Mechan, there was an earlier fight. There was a fight with the printing press of Kapust, which is very wichtig. And exactly, Mishpacha, the Kapusta press got into a fight earlier with Slavita press to print something that Slavita had a Haskama on, and they spoke to Rabbanim like the Hafla and Shlomo Kluger and other great Rabbanim that they spoke to, who said that they were allowed to do it, and the rationale that they said was as follows: this that you get a Haskama to print the Sefer, exclusively for a long time, is only Kolkami is still printing it. If you make a run of the Sefer, you make 5,000 copies. You sell them out, and then you go to sleep. You're not allowed to say, no one else is allowed to print while I'm sleeping. People are not allowed to print while you're still printing, if you're in the game. If you are done printing, so the Vilna press, Tainid, there are no more Slavita Shasin to be had. They're impossible to find a Slavita Shas on the market. Shasin are necessary. We're allowed to print the Cherem Zohar. And this is what the Mishnas Yaakov said. They were in the middle, Slavita was in the middle of retypesetting and printing a 4th edition. Now, to which Mishnas Yaakov said, it was you could always string it along forever. You could always be just in the middle of reprinting what you did, and you just keep extending it. You're done. You're out. You're not going to be ready anyhow till after the 25-year period. Your new Shas, so your next Shas is as new as anybody else's. You want a taina, maybe you should be able to print it also? Fine, that's a shmooze. And this is a big copyright fight, and it's really a sugya farzich, and ultimately the Vilna Shas got a haskama, they weighed in, Rabbi Kiveger, Shleimeger, the Chassam Sofer, they got mamish the Gaon Elam to weigh in, and which is why the Vilna Shas was able to be printed. Shlomo Kluger kind of threaded the needle. Shlomo Kluger said that they could print, but they could also sell. Slavita could still sell, but Vilna could print. All these different things, and rather just as a mark of respect to Ephraim Zalman Margolis, whose Haskama was ready gone at this point, but whose Haskama was the main Haskama in discussion, Side the Mekilim, Side the Oisrim, Side the Matir, meaning everyone, no matter what side you're on, every person claimed that Ephraim Zalman really was masking to them. That I saw a letter where he changed his mind, or I heard from so-and-so he changed his mind, similar to like when you handle an Erev in Shaila, anytime Ramosha is involved, everyone will say Ramosha was really masking, but like this, like that. I mean, usually it's a sign of respect of the gadol who's looming right outside the picture, meaning even though he's not involved, he's involved. So everyone was claiming that Ephraim Zalman was on their side. Now this is a grace of copyright fight. Now, I think this is the part that, it's not interesting to note, rather, so I figure how can I leave this out? Kveger, the Slavita brothers, the Shapiro brothers, said about Kveger, not about him, they said about his son, Reb Shleimeger, that he's Bar Kuziva. Bar Kuziva, the Gemara in Chelik refers to Bar Kochba as Bar Kuziva. Why he's called Bar Kuziva? Kuziva is Milashon Koziv, liar, because he fooled Reb Akiva. The Reb Akiva thought he could be Mashiach, he fooled Reb Akiva. So the Slavita brother said that Reb Shleimeger is Bar Kuziva. He's a son who fools his father, meaning he fooled his father to think X, Y, and Z. To which Kveger wrote a letter, and Kveger was a very, very placid person, generally speaking. Kveger wrote a letter that they were mevaza Nishno, they mevaza my son, who was a great Talmid Chacham, by saying that he, was convinced me to do something shalek halacha. They were also mevaza me by saying that I'm convincible to do something shalek halacha by my son, and Eini yachel limchol. He says I'm not able to be meichel forever. This is what Kveger writes, and it's Yedua that the what do you say? Not just jail. It's Yedua. The ending. The Slavita brothers had an employee, I forgot his name, Shleima something or other, who worked for them, who was a bacher, the press bacher. He hung himself in the attic of the Slavita press, and the Russian government got involved and accused them of murdering him and covering up the evidence. And ultimately they were sentenced to 1,500 lashes, which was supposed to be a death sentence. And if you survive the lashes, you go to Siberia for the rest of your life. And the way, this is like a murderous story of Mesiris Nefesh that the Chassidish Welt says over, the way the lashes were distributed, they would line up, soldiers on both sides. You'd have to run through the gauntlet, and they'd hit you from both sides. And the younger brother, Pinchas Shapiro, dropped his yarmulke, fell off while he was running through, and he stopped in place while he was being beaten from both sides to put his yarmulke back on, and then he kept running. Lamai said neither one of them died; they both survived, and they were bouncing around from hospital to gulag to hospital to gulag. They were, beaten and broken neshamas. Ultimately, during some sort of period of reformation, one of the czars gave them a pardon, and they were able to go free. But mamash shever keli. So, it was very easy to see Kveger's Kpei to play out. Not to the Kach, the Baal Tanya, in one of his Igeris, in the Igeris Baal Tanya, the Baal Tanya writes, I don't know the other side of the story, but Baal Tanya writes that it's Yedua, that from Machlekes like this, nothing good comes out, and it's Yedua that the Seif of Sai the brothers Shapira and Sai the printers of the Vilna Shas was Zachri Mar. It was a very, very, very sad ending. So now I don't know what the sad. It's not. I don't think it's Yedua what the ending was for the Vilna brothers, but I don't think it's Yedua what happened there. But it's Yedua. I think so. Now I think this is the part that might be historical fiction. I think that the siyum that everybody makes today, the signon of the siyum, the way the siyum is made, is impacted by the Shas wars, and by the arms race of the Shas wars. Everybody was trying to put out a better Shas than the next one. Meaning there was a big competition. Who's going to put out the better Shas? And that's why all these Mefarshim that we have in the back started being added in, and it's still going on. Meaning all the Shas was a pretty basic, simple sefer. What the Slavita brothers did, they added the riff. People added a little knech. The Shas wars really kicked off in the 1800s after this fight, and everyone started making a better Shas. Now, what do I mean that the Siyum is impacted by that? Is as follows. So, really, I just want to talk about a few different akudis of Siyum over here. So, the basic, I guess, shaila that's worth of discussing over here, maybe we'll leave for last, is saving siyum and making siyum during the 9 days. Let's save that. I want to talk about something else first. The nusach that we have for the siyum, the way it's set, the way it's in the back of the Gemara, is not as old as you would think. Meaning the Gemara says, the Gemara in Psachim and the Gemara in Shabbos, Abai Amar Abai Tesili, that when a Tzorv Rabbanon finishes a Masechta, I make a siyum for him. The Gemara in Ksubas tells us that our Papa used to pay for siyumim for young Talmidei Chacham. So there's muskar in different places in Shas that siyum were made, and that siyum is a davar chashuv. A siyum should be made. It's something important. and obviously it's Yidua the Marshal and Yam Shashlem Bava Kama makes a dig from the Gemara and Gemara on Shabbos that the Siyam is a Sudas Mitzvah, and it's Yidua the Siyam is a Zach. But what exactly you say by a Siyam, meaning the exact nusach of the Hadron, is not brought down in a Gemara, it's not brought down in Rishonim. It doesn't exactly say what the Hadron of a Siyam is. The place that's the most coherent, write-up of what a Siyam is supposed to look like is the Tshuva from the Maram Mintz, who's like a late Rishon, mamish the end of the Tkufas Rishonim, and I'll read from it a little bit because he's the one who says what a Siyam looks like, and he says as follows. He says Ravi Rosh Hashiva shu lemid mesechtem chaveirav v'talmidav k'shabal l'seif mesechtem. When he gets to the end, Yishayir ma'at b'seif ha'chas ha'kosher. And pay attention to this line. Save this for later. It says Yishayir ma'at b'seif ha'chas ha'kosher. You should leave a few lines at the end until it's a good time to make a siyum. Keep that in mind when it comes to 9 days Erev Pesach, meaning it wasn't just invented yesterday to save a siyum for Shas HaKosher. It says Yishayir ma'at ha'chas ha'kosher yom d'royi l'sakin suda no l'chvei d'Torah v'talmideim. A day that's royi to make a nice suda for the Talmidei Chacham and the Talmideim. V'az royi l'kabitz kol ha'kahol k'shabal rav l'sayim. You gather everyone together. Kol mishirav l'ava l'siyam v'mesechtas. He says v'smach yesh v'mesechtas. Oh, that's fine. Then he says as follows. He says, what do you do? He says, so mekabitz m'roiv l'chvei d'Torah v'chein tev l'chach fine. Achasiyim yemer asaras b'nei Reb Papa. This is the place that this is brought down. After the siyum, you say the 10 children of b'nei Reb Papa. Achach yemer kaddish and yesh minyan. They say kaddish if there's a minyan. V'yesh yemer kaddish d'Rabbanan. There are those who say kaddish d'Rabbanan after a siyum. Ach oisei kaddish einei matzah b'neinu l'chein b'roiv pam le'shamati le'merak shalom b'lei t'skabel. Say regular chatzi kaddish without the skabel is what the Maramin says to say. Ve'ilu hein asaras b'nei Reb Papa. V'chein maschilin hadrin alach taitan alach le'nitnes iminach le'sishin iminach le'ba'almadein. He says this whole thing. Chanina bar Papa Rambam, he brings the whole list. Then he says, "Other Papa's chusan yamad lanu brich rachmana d'siyait and yiratzon denizka limud b'yeshiva shamaylam shar tzadik yolam." So it's like at this part, I think God fell out. He says, you say the 10 children of Bnei Papa, and you say there's schus zolon beishtein, and we should be zeichet to sit with them and learn with them shar tzadik yolam. Then you make a sudana, etc. Now there's a few different interessante nekudis that are mentioned in this Maramins that are worth discussing in regards to the siyum. So the part that I'm going to leave is the part about pushing off a siyum. And that's a big discussion in the place in regards to the 9 days. I will get back to that in a minute. B is he includes this Reb Papa part, these Asaras B'nei Reb Papa, to say the 10 children of Reb Papa, which is a shtickle mystery. What's the significance? What's the kesher? What's the kesher to the siyum of saying the Asaras B'nei Reb Papa? And third is he's masked this idea of saying Kaddish by a siyum. Now, so I'm going to do Al Achron Rishon, Val Rishon Achron. We'll start from the last one. We'll start from Kaddish first, and we'll work our way back to pushing off siyum. So the Kaddish part is interesting because everyone's been to Siyum. The Kaddish that we say is not a Chatzi Kaddish, B'lei T'skabel. The Kaddish we say is a very rare, interesting Kaddish. We say the Kaddish of Ba'alma Du'asa L'Schadasa, right? Now, the taich of those words, I'll just taich it a little because it's a fascinating Kaddish. The Kaddish is as follows. We say a Kaddish that goes like this. We say, the Asa L'Chadasa Alma, the Hashem was going to reestablish his world. He's going to make Techiyas Hameisim. He's going to bring back to life, and he's going to build Yerushalayim. He's going to put the Beis Hamikdash there. He's going to uproot Ovdei Avodah Zarah from Eretz Yisrael. He's going to return the being Oved Hashem to its proper pride of place. Bezivo B'Yikari with its proper ziv and Yikros. That's the interesting few lines of Kaddish. So the Kaddish, this is called in the Rishonim called Kaddish HaGadol. This is the Kaddish HaGadol, meaning there's a lot of different types of Kaddish, and this is Kaddish HaGadol. Kaddish HaGadol refers to Techiyas Hameisim and Binyan Beis Hamikdash, all sorts of Asad Lavedik things that the Kaddish refers to. Now, how did this Kaddish replace the Kaddish, Chatzi Kaddish T'skabel that the Maramins is referring to? When did this become the Kaddish? Where did this Kaddish come from? How did this Kaddish become the Kaddish of a Siyum? So it's interesting like this. This Kaddish comes from Masechta Seifrim. The Brisa in Masechta Seifrim says that it says a few different things, depending on which nusach you have. It says a few different things. But the Brisa in Masechta Seifrim says as follows. It says that we say this Kaddish, it says some of these words, not the exact full nusach, but the Ein Omer say you only say this Kaddish al Chacham HaDeirish. That's version number one, al Chacham HaDeirish. The Machlekes Girsayis between the Ga'inim. Rav Amram going and Rav Sadi going. Two different Gesayos in the Masechta Seifrim. The first version is now what does that mean? The Kaddish Hagadol that's being referred to, I don't know if anyone's been to a Kfura, but when we actually say this Kaddish is by a Kfura. After you put the mace in the ground, by the Kfura, they say this Kaddish, which Chayra is very sensible, right? You're talking about you're burying someone who's now gone and dead. So you say the Kaddish that says, L'Asid Lavi, there's going to be Techiyas Hameisim, and there's going to be, Binyan Beis HaMikdash, and this guy will come back. Now, says the Masechta Seifrim, but on who do you say this Kaddish when you put him in the ground? Say, Ela al-Chacham Haderish. Al-Chacham Haderish. Now, why? The Mefarshim say right away, because not everyone's guaranteed Techiyas Hameisim. Techiyas Hameisim is for the good people. So, how do you know you're putting Joe Schmo in the ground, he's coming back? Why would you talk about Techiyas Hameisim when you're putting Joe Schmo in the ground? You say it by Chacham Haderish. By Chacham Haderish, you say, don't worry, there's going to be Techiyas Hameisim for this Chacham Haderish. That's the din, and that is brought down in many Rishonim, the Machzor Vitri, the Avudraham, the Rekeach, many Rishonim bring down this Kaddish. And as I always get past in the Shulchan Aruch and Shinai and Vav and Hilchas Avelos, when it talks about Kfura, Ramah brings down that the minig is that when you put someone in, finish the Kfura, the minig is you say Kaddish Hagadol, which is Muskar and Masechta Seifrim, and Avudraham already says that it says Veinamina Selah al Chacham Haderish. Today we don't want to insult people. He brings a Ramban that we're afraid to insult people. People are very sensitive. If you're going to start, cliving guys, who you say it on, who you don't say it on, people are going to be insulted. So today we just say it on everybody, and it's wishful thinking. Hopefully there'll be Techiyas Hameisim for whoever you're putting in the ground. That's the Kaddish Hagadol. Now that has absolutely nothing to do with Siyumim. It makes perfect sense to have to do with Kfura. Where it is in Shulchan Aruch and where it shows up makes perfect sense. It belongs there. That makes perfect sense. And Kaddish is Bakant as a tefillah that the living say for the dead. So that makes perfect sense. You would say that tefillah over there. I'm glad that once we're talking about this, the whole idea of saying Kaddish, that a child says Kaddish for his father, and that's a schos. So meaning that the whole idea that Kaddish is associated with the dead and with the schos for the living. There's a brisa in Masechtas Kala and Kala Rabsi. It's quite brought down, like in Tana de Belio has a different nusach, and the Medrash Tanchum has a different nusach. It's brought down a story, and it's a bizarre story. It says Rabbi Akiva was once walking along a path somewhere, and he saw someone who was clear to him was dead. However, Rabbi Akiva knew that he saw a dead person who was slaving away, working, schlepping bricks from here to here and back and forth, just slaving away. Rabbi Akiva stopped him and he says, "What's this? What are you doing here? What's going on over here?" And the dead person turns to Rabbi Akiva and he says, "Please don't interrupt me. If you interrupt me, if I don't fill my quota, the Malach HaMamuna Alai, is going to beat me. Just don't interrupt me. I have work to do." So Rabbi Akiva says, "No. Gizrani Alach, you have to talk to me. Stop what you're doing and explain to me what's going on." He says, "You don't understand. I was a bad guy, and this is my einish. My einish is that I have to, work over here, schlep from here to here and here to here, for who knows how long. And if I stop or I don't complete it, I get terrible beatings." But he says, you should know, the Mace tells Rabbi Akiva, Shamati, I overheard them saying that Im yesh loy ben, if he has a son who could do something for him, that could really take care of him. So Rabbi Akiva said, "What's your name?" He says, "I'm so-and-so from such and such a village." So it says Rabbi Akiva traveled to the village, and he says, "Does anybody know of, this guy?" He said, "Yeah, Baruch HaMakom Shehargai. Given that he killed him. This guy was a terrible guy. Not only was he a ganef and a gazlan and this, he was af bal naira marasa biyam akipurim. He was a shreklich guy." Rabbi Akiva says, "Okay, good. I don't care about all that. He niach ben achrav, he niach zara achrav. Did he leave a child?" So they tell him no, but he left his wife pregnant. When he died. So Rabbi Akiva goes to the house of his wife and he finds a little child there. And Rabbi Akiva tells the mother, "I need this child." He takes the child to yeshiva and he teaches him Aleph Beis and then Mishnah, then Gemara, until he reaches the point where he's able to go B'tzibur and Omer Brich Rachmana B'tzibur. He was able to bench HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'tzibur. Now, and then Rabbi Akiva leaves this village, and as he's leaving, he bumps into this dead person who tells him, "Tenuach daita sheinachtes daiti." You could rest easy because you calmed me. You made my life easier. So, it's a madna brisa. I mean, what was Rabbi Akiva's big fanem to go do this? What was the big uftu? But the Gain in Yeridei, when he talks about about Kaddish Yasim, the Gain brings this Kalarapsi is the makar that we say that a Yasim said that a child says Kaddish for his father. So Kaddish is a big schos kilu for the dead. So it makes sense that this Masechta Seifrim, this this Kaddish that you say, Al Chacham Adayrish, is what you say when you put a guy in the ground. You daven for him that the schus that you're saying Kaddish, he should be zeichet to have Techiyas Hameisim, and it's a prayer for everybody. You're hoping that this guy will be included in Techiyas Hameisim. So how did it migrate over to Siyumim? So there is another girsa. This is brought down in the Ga'inim already. There is another girsa in the Masechta Seifrim that says as follows. It says this tefillah of Kaddish, Oimrim this tefillah of Kaddish, and then it says ve'ein Oimrim I say ela al chacham v'hadrash. You say it on a chacham and on the drasha. It sounds like you say it on the speech. You say this Kaddish. Now this is Rav Amram Goin's girsa in the Masechta Seifrim, and based on this, the Rambam in Yad in a regular halach in the Rambam paskins as follows. I'll read you the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah, in the end of Hilchos Tefillah, the Rambam has like say the Tefillah Sayyim, the whole Tefillah, and then over end over there he has like his version of Maimer Kadishim, all the Seder Kadishim, and he says as follows. He says, Kol Asarim Yisrael, any 10 Jews who get together, O Yeser, Sha'oiskim b'Talmud Torah Shal Peh, or being Oisik in Talmud Torah Shal Peh, Afilu b'Midrashis Ha'Haggadis, even if they're doing Shvacha learning, Midrashis Ha'Haggadis, they're not doing Mamish, top level learning. Kishein Mesaimin, when they finish, Oimer Achareim Kaddish b'Nusach Zeh. They say Kaddish with this Nusach. He's Kaddish Merabah, the Alma, the Asid Lechadet Alma. He brings this whole entire Nusach of the Kaddish Masechta Seifrim that we have by the Siyam. So the Rambam says that anytime you have a group of people that's learning, you say this Nusach of Kaddish, so that after the drasha. So now we have step 1 kilo of the Kaddish moving over from just dead people, the way it is in Shulchan Aruch, to being something that's more negeya in daily life, and something that has to do with learning. Now, today, this is not the minig amongst anybody to say this Kaddish after learning. What is the minig is there's a Kaddish D'Rabbanan that we do say after a shir, right? We say Rechanan ben Akasha, we say Kaddish D'Rabbanan, and that is gebracht in Shulchan Aruch and Siman Nun Dalet, and it's actually a grace of machlekes, because there's a bit of a serious Rambam. The Rambam over here says, in Yad, the Rambam says, afilu if you're learning Haggadah or Drash, you say this Kaddish, which is mashma that be'ikr it should be gezakt on like real limud, if you're saying real learning. If you're doing Talmud or Drash, that could also work. The Rambam in Pirush Mishnayos at the end of Masechtas Avos, the Rambam, the Mishnah over there says, of Chanani ben Akash Emer, Ratzak HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zakas Yisrael, which is what we say at the end of Pirkei Avos. The Rambam in Pirush Mishnayos says, this Mishnah doesn't really belong here. It's not a Mishnah from this Masechta. But Techiyas, the Mishnayos over here are just Drash, and you want to be able to say Kaddish afterwards, so we say a Mishnah that has to do with halacha in it, that has a pasuk in it, Mishnah because it has a pasuk in it, and therefore you're able to say the Kaddish D'Rabbanan that you're supposed to say afterwards, so we say this Mishnah. So it's really a steer, a Rambam. If this Kaddish is be'ikr on Drash, or the Kaddish is be'ikr on Torah Sheba'al Peh, on Torah Sheba'al, meaning real Torah from the Torah. And the Gedolei Achronim, the Magen Avram, and the Be'er Sheva, and the Chida, and others, back and forth on machlekes, which way is the right way, which way is the ikar way to learn the Rambam. The Chida actually says a very shem zach. The Chida in his tshuva in Chaim Shal, the Chida says that if Ada the Rambam holds that it's the ikar supposed to be on learning. He says, but normal if you have a shir on a real sugya, how many people actually understood it? If the Rav got up in shir in shul and he said a shir on a sugya, a few people understood it. You probably don't have a minion of mevinim who understood the shir to say kaddish on. So we say a shtickle drash, which is shavuot l'chol nefesh. Everybody could understand a little vertel, a little something. You say a little vertel, and then you could make the kaddish, b'shufi. You have no problem. Everybody's ready to hear kaddish. So that's the Chidaz Yishuv, the Be'er Sheva, the Magen Avram says. The Magen Avram says it's be'ikr only supposed to be on Torah Sheba'al Peh, not just drashas. And based on this is many different how you paskin, meaning on what type of shir you say this kaddish would be a shayla. But yechshir, this is the Rambam's psak, and the mashal in Taimani Jews. Okay, follow the Rambam in a much more straightforward fashion. Ad kedei kach, l'mashal, they Kabbalah got to them very late. We were just talking about this on Shabbos. Kabbalah got to the Taimani Jews very, very late because the Rambam doesn't have any Kabbalah in there, and the last kilu misnagdim to Kabbalah in Mamish recent history was the Taimani Jews. Bakant, Rabbi Yosef Kapach, he's the one who translated the Mer Nevuchim. When he became a Rav on the Rabbanut in Eretz Yisrael, like in the 60s, he had to sign a contract that he believes in Kabbalah. Because the Yemenis were, suspect. So but the Yemenis who follow the Rambam, the most straight fashion way, if you go to a Yemeni shul and they have a shir, pick you up a shir, they're going to end up and say this Kaddish that we say in a Siyam. Which is, straight up in the Rambam. The Rambam says that you make this Kaddish. So now, this is just the segment that holds that this Kaddish has to do with learning. So now how did it get to Siyumim? And the answer is, nobody knows. Nobody knows how this ended up in a Siyam. the first time that this was printed, this Kaddish was printed with a hadron in the back of the Gemara, was like in 1850. Literally yesterday. The mamash around the corner. Nobody knows how this ended up being by a siyum. Meaning like what the kesher with this siyum is. And that's where I say that maybe this is historical fiction. But I think that in the rush of every Gemara to improve on its predecessor and every Shas to be better and to have more things, somebody added in a more exciting Kaddish. Somebody added in a more exciting Kaddish. The other Tzadim range are worse. I'll read you like this. If you remember, pay attention to the Rambam.
Rambam says what about Sim?
Rambam says you say Chatzi Kaddish without this Kaddish. Yeah. Listen. Who? Bells does regular Kaddish. Some see them still do regular Kaddish. Some people do. Is he Belzer? Is he a Belzer? So Bells does a regular Kaddish, others do regular Kaddish, and there are plenty of cries and lies that still do a regular Chatzi Kaddish by the Siyam. But listen to the Rambam, I want to read you the Rambam. The Rambam says like this, the Rambam says, Kol Asar Yisrael, yes, She'oiskim B'Talmud Torah Shal Peh, V'afilu B'Midrash Say V'Haggadus, K'Shehein Misaymin Omer Acharayim Kaddish. There are those who say that it's Pasha to tell you Sefer. Someone read this Rambam, and it said, K'Shehein Misaymin, we learned that it's two different dinim. When you say a shir, kama, or K'Shehein Misaymin, when you make a siyam, Omer Acharayim Kaddish, Menuzach Zeh, Yizkadav Yizkadish, say this Kaddish. No. There's a guy who wrote about it in Beisam Yisrael. He wrote like 10 pieces on Kaddish. He's a big expert in Kaddish. He looked at every Gemara. You can look at a Slavita Shas, look at a Vilna Shas. It's not there. This Kaddish is not there. First time it was printed, I think,
which printing press was the first one?
Was the Varsha Shas in like 1856 in Masechta Sukkah. In one copy of Masechta Sukkah, the Varsha Shas, they put this thing. Now, L'chaira, it had to do with the arms race. Like there's an arms race to have a better Shas. Some people included the Rashash, and some people added a better Kaddish. There was an arms race to have a better Kaddish, and some of this Kaddish slipped in. Today, this is Kemat Adavar Pashat, I think, in most cries of Klal Yisrael, that you say this Kaddish. Now, alternately, you could suggest, and Reb Tzaddik, who wrote this, Reb Tzaddik was a Rebbe in Lublin late, close to the 1900s even. Reb Tzaddik, in one of his Svarim, writes it's a reason, like a whole Kabbalistic reason for saying this Kaddish, but it's a little bit like Acher Meis Kadesh Memor, meaning it doesn't, what do you say? Reb Tzaddik. Tzaddik is writing a rationale why this Kaddish, why this is the Kaddish you say by Siyam, but it doesn't change the fact that.
Why can you typically have a similar thing?
So you could say that, but this is we don't do it by Limud HaTorah. We don't pass it like this. The Ram doesn't make it the Shulchan Aruch. None of the Neisikim in the Shulchan Aruch says Magen Avram, the Shach in your day talks about Siyumim. The Magen Avram talks about Siyumim. There are many Gedolei Acharim that talk about Siyumim and don't say this. They bring the Maramins, they bring Yisei Chatzi Kaddish. They don't say this. They don't bring it down. Now another possible Havana, but again, this is a little bit like Acher Meis. This is a rationale once it's done. There's a Bakanta story. I think Rabbi Fran said over the Sima Shas actually about Rabbi Moshe. It's a Bakanta story. There was a guy Moskowitz. I forgot his first name. He was a boxer, and his son became Balchuva. He was fry. He lived in he was a boxer. His son became Balchuva and moved to Lower East Side. Learned in MTJ. And when he retired, the boxer, he moved into his son's house. I think he was 50. He's a youngish man. He had what's it called after the football? What the football players get after too much
CTE.
CTE. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't holding by anything real in the brains department, and he came there and he saw his son was as a orangutan and learning. He wanted him to taste, and he begged his son to learn with him. He said, "But Pa, you don't even know Ivri, you don't even know Aleph." He says, "Teach me." And they spent a year starting with Aleph, learning all the way through one blot Gemara. He finished, I forgot which blot it was, maybe Brachas Tapez. What is it? Yeah, exactly. Spent 1 year learning one blot Gemara, and the father, the boxer, said, "I really would love to make a siyum." And his son told him, "Listen, Pa, that's not a siyum on. You got to finish, Masechta, something." He says, "But if you really want, I'll go ask Rav Moshe." He went to ask Rav Moshe, and Rav Moshe, knew him, knew the story, and Rav Moshe says, "Yeah, you could. This is roy for a siyum." And not only is it roy, I want to come speak by the siyum. And they made a siyum. Rav Moshe came and spoke by the siyum. How chashuv this is, the staff, and that night, Mr. Moskowitz Senior went home and died in his sleep. He was not a very old man. I knew his grandchild, who Nebuch died very young. I knew his grandchild. So this is a real story. Meaning, it became famous. Our friends said, "Oh, but yeah." But I knew this person. His grandfather died that night. And Rav Moshe got up by his levaya the next day. And Rav Moshe said that the Gemara in Avodah Zarah tells a story of Rav Elazar ben Dudaya, also about tshuva, who was a meridik about taiva, the Gemara says, and he used to go, seeking out all different taivas. And one time he had up a shtickle heret tshuva, and he sat down, he put his head between his knees, and he started crying, and he said, haram ugvayis bakshalei rachamim, shemayim va'aretz bakshalei rachamim. He cried, at shegavim b'bchia umeis. The Gemara says he died, Pashad had crying from tshuva. So Yatsa Baskel of Amra, Baskel came out, it's one of the Dafid Zayin, the Baskel said, Yesh Kanelam B'Sha'achas. No, so the Gemara said, Rebbe Lazar ben Dadai, who's a Amaretz of Al-Taiva, Rebbe Lazar ben Dadai, and Muchan Leilam Haba, Mizum L'chaylam Haba. So Bacha, Rebbe V'Amar, Rebbe cried, and Rebbe says, Yesh Kanelam B'Sha'achas. Like, you could be Kanesh Elam B'Sha'achas. So Reb Moshe got up by this person's Levaya, and Reb Moshe says, Yesh Kanelam B'Daf Achas. You could, a person could be kind in his world with one daf. So, it's shaykh that when you're standing at a siyum, at whoever it is, there's a bechina of, yesh kainei lama b'mesachta achas. There's a bechina of saying you're going to be zeichet to Techiyas Hameisim, you're going to be zeichet to everything because of the siyum you're making. But again, I concede this is achri mais. This is giving rationales once it already slipped in. Once it already slipped in, it's yitachan that people felt it was pasik for a siyum. A siyum is the apex, the crescendo of your avodas hachaim. You're learning, you're being messiahing something. That's what's going to be mezaki you in Elam Haba and Techiyas Hameisim and Binyan Beis Hamikdash. So we say, this kaddish over there. What do you say? Oh, so now Reb Papa. So I said we'll go. I'll achron rishon. We'll go back in order. So now let's back up one step to Reb Papa, to the 10 children of Reb Papa. So now the 10 children of Reb Papa is again another mystery. Why? Like what the shaykhs is. Now the Ramah in I think in Mechir Yayin, but it could be in one of his other svarim, and the Ramaz and the Maral's brother Rav Chaim in his Sefer Achayim they both wrote like different drushim to explain what the 10 children of Papa, what the significance of the 10 children of Papa is. There are those who say that it's a school of Zikaron and it helps you remember if you say the 10 children of Papa. There are those who say it's a bechina of Pel Adaberboy, the Torah comes from Moshe Rabbeinu with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Yosef Schwartz, he says. No, not that one. Rabbi Yosef Schwartz from Varsha in the 1800s, in Zecher Yosef, he writes that Reb Papa's 10 children were killed by Kiddush Hashem. So Reb Papa at every siyum that he would make would be maskir his children like a Kel Mali Rachamim, like all his 10 children who died. And he says that's why you'll never see in Shas Rev Papa referred to as Papa. Rev Papa is always Rav Papa. The only time that you call Rev Papa Papa is in Siyumim. We say Ram Bar Papa, Achay Bar Papa, Dar Bar Papa, Acha Bar Papa, Hara, right? Why? He says because we're really just copying Rev Papa himself. Rev Papa, when he was making Siyumim, was being maskir his children. He wouldn't say Rav Papa. He wouldn't say Achay Bar Rav Papa. He said Achay Bar Papa. So when that became part of the Seder Siyum, it became Bar Papa. Just
why we say that.
See, he says, the Gemara in Pesachim says, in the end of Pesachim says that Papa used to sponsor Siyumim. So Yosef Papa was a big sponsor of Siyumim. Every Siyum that he sponsored, they did his Nusach, and it caught on, when you see that being a sponsor is a good way to get your name, to have a good thing forever. Now, what do you say? Karsatay, yeah, because he sponsored. Exactly. So that's how it stuck in. The other thing that became a Vart, Rabbi Yashiv used to say over, from the Teplika Rav. Rabbi Yashiv was a Talmud of the Teplika Rav. Big Maris expert, actually. Most people today of Shemesh and Maris comes from Teplika Rav. Happens to be.
Very controversial also.
Yeah, but all the coolest in Maris that developed the Semichan come from Teplika Rav. Teplika Rav is a big Maris expert.
It's made up.
Yeah, it's Teplika Rav's Musayr. Okay, so Rabbi Yashiv was a Talmud of his. Shem Zalman learned by him. Tzvi Pesach Frank was close to him. Whatever. Fine. And he said over, and Rabbi Yashiv used to say this over, that in Shas there's plenty of machloksim. There's a lot of times where things are an argument. Now, there's a lot of different styles of how to resolve an argument. Sometimes the Gemara says hilchasek or whatever. Sometimes the Gemara will bring a raya or a big diyun in one shita, not in the other shita, and that tells you that we hold like one of the shitas. Rav Papa, 10 places in Shas, when there's a machlokes, Rav Papa says hilchach neimrinu l'tarvayu, hilchach nevid l'tarvayu, hilchach let's do like all of them, like both of them, like like that. Ad kedei kach that there's a Gemara in Brachas of Birchas HaTorah, where the Gemara brings 3 days of what you're supposed to say for Birchas HaTorah. And the Gemara, there's 2 girsayis in the Gemara. There's one girsa that says, let's say both of them. Now there's 3 options. There's 3 man amrim there. The Gemara says to say 2 of the 3. The Gaon brings a girsa from the Rif. The girsa, say all of them. Which is how we pass in the Shulchan Aruch to say all of them. Yashiv used to say over what was bothering the Gaon. What was the correction the Gaon was making over here? So the correction is that Rav Papa didn't choose sides. Rav Papa used to say, do everything. Be machmer like everything. Do everything. So it couldn't be Hilchot Le'minul Tarvayu, choose 2 out of the 3. That's not Rav Papa's MO. So the Mamela, the guy and change it like the Rif's Nus, like the Rif's Girsa, Hilchot Le'minul Kulu. Say all of them. Now, Lamashal, there's so many things that are like Asher Yatzar. We say the whole version, the whole Nusach of Asher Yatzar is an amalgamation of different shitas. That our Papa was Machriya to say all of them. Berchus HaTorah is an amalgamation of different shitas. That our Papa was Machriya to say all of them. And there's many more. There's 10 examples throughout Shas where Papa makes like a pshara and says, do everybody. So the Teplik Rav used to say, the reason why we say Rav Papa's 10 children is to be maskir Rav Papa, who was Mekadosh Shem Shemayim by Kila bringing everybody together. A siyum is bring everybody together. It brings everybody together. It's a completion. It's a shleimus. Rav Papa gave a certain shleimus to the Gemara, to Chazal, by bringing everybody together and by not harping on the machleksim. I don't know if we have time to go back to the siyum part.
No, we need that.
Okay, we'll talk about it for a second. The siyum part. So now, it's Yudu already that many poskim were very against saving Yisiyum for the 9 days. Even up to and including the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan writes very strongly. What do you say?
Never made a siyum yet. They want to do it now.
Yeah.
That's it.
No. But the Aruch HaShulchan writes Ra'al of Hameisim that developed, saves their siyumim to the 9 days. Like, you shouldn't do it or whatever. Now, there's many poskim that hold like that and that are against it. The Dali Rabbah, the Mishnah Berurah, the Aruch HaShulchan. There's more. I'm forgetting names. There's many more. Earlier poskim, the Shar Melech has a tshuva against it. There's many poskim more against it. Now, Lamaisa, Pok Chaziyam Medabar, the Velt knows the minig is that you save your siyumim for the 9 days. And you make siyum on the 9 days, we save them for Erev Pesach, you save them for these times in the 9 days. Now, the Shlomo Kluger, in his tshuva that he writes against Ali Rabbah, he brings this Mara Mintz as the Makar. He says the Mara Mintz tells you that you save a siyum for an opportune time.
That's what he says.
Well, hang on. Shlomo Kluger says the Mara Mintz tells you you're allowed to save a siyum for an opportune time. He said, no, not you're allowed to. He says you're supposed to save a siyum for an opportune time. I'll read you. He says, Yeshayir ma'af b'soif at Shas HaKosher Yoyim D'Roy l'taken Sudana l'choy that Torah l'indeh. So says Rav Shlomo Kluger, if everybody's desperate for meat and everybody wants to eat, you're never going to get a happier time for people to join your siyum.
But they enjoy it.
So others come along and say, of course, the Aruch HaShulchan says this, they're not enjoying the siyum, they're enjoying Pesach. Exactly. And the machlekes goes on and on. But the Akapanim from this tshuva is one of the makaris. There's a lot more to say about this one, we'll leave this one.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.